Samba's just finishing something, then we'll start. Are you ready, Samba?
Oh, whenever you are.
Okay, Chris, start the feed. In 10 seconds, Samba, just start in about 10 seconds.
Okay.
Go for it, Samba.
Okay, the slides.
Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you may be. It's a real pleasure to have you at this 4th edition of Sembene across Africa. Despite the pandemic, of course, we just wanted really to respect the symbol, although our goals are great and hoping maybe we'll inspire more people in this occasion. I'll start just a little bit. Really, Sembene across Africa is one aspect of Sembene's legacy. His legacy as a filmmaker, his legacy as a writer, yes, his legacy as a political activist. So Sembene across Africa, that's what it is about. It's a part of a larger project, a larger legacy rescue, including Sembene's archives, Sembene's papers, including the restoration of Sembene's films, hopefully also the restoration of Sembene's home and hopefully its transformation into a cultural center. I can just tell you at this point, very, very briefly, that we are happy to announce that Sembene's papers have been rescued. They are in the process of being digitized, and the cataloging has been already set. But just to insist, Jason and I have been working on this now for years, but this is a collective work. Over and above Sembene's legacy, our goal and our vision is to create a visual and written and oral archive of not only Sembene, but of African culture, of African memory, whether it comes from writers, filmmakers, singers, so that our experiences, our long nightmare through the colonial period, that finally that nightmare can end thanks to the telling of new stories. We strongly believe that, yes, as human beings, we are made of flesh and blood, but we are also made of stories. So far, in 4 years, we have reached millions of people throughout the continent and its diaspora. Thanks to support from foundations, from individuals, from families, during those 4 editions, we have been able to reach 41 countries in the continent. We have reached millions of people through numerous screenings, universities, cultural centers, schools, kitchen tables, courtyards, proving that, yes, we are used to having our films screened, to have stories told to us within a theater. But it also goes to show that there are other possibilities. We wish the return of many, many, many thousands of movie theaters in the African continent. But until then, with the magic of technology, but mostly thanks to the work of grassroots organizations, we have been able to motivate. Here is our approach. Instead of going from top down, meaning us deciding what people should do, what they need to do in the rural areas or in the cities, all we do is to provide our materials, our DVDs, and let it to the local people, whether in the cities, in the countries, to do it the way they want it. It has been really a joy to see that we have been able to give micro grants to very rural areas, for instance, in Malawi, give them grant to buy internet connections, or to provide generators, or to just basically make this T-shirt you can see on the screen. And it has been overwhelmingly rewarding. But this is only the beginning, and we invite all of you to continue supporting us. So for this edition, the chair of the English panel, Fight the Power, Sembene and Black Power, will be chaired by Professor Sada, our friend, our colleague, who is a professor of African Caribbean literature at the University of Victoria in British Columbia, has profusely written on African cinema, on Jibril Diop Mambeti, and on Ousmane Sembene. It's my pleasure to welcome Professor Sada. Sada.
He needs to unmute, I think.
Sada, can you hear me?
Yes. So I was saying that I'm just going to go ahead and present the speakers, the panelists. The first speaker is going to be Jihan El Tahri, who is a writer, director, and producer of documentary films, and whose work has received numerous accolades throughout the world. She has a long filmography among which Behind the Rainbow, House of Sound, The Price of Aid, Cuba's African Odyssey, L'Afrique en morceaux, Israel and the Arabs, Algérie, la vie malgré tout, Arafat behind the myths, abortion in Ireland, and many, many more. So Jihan El Tahri is a member of the Executive Bureau of the FEPACI, Federation of Pan-African Cinema, and Secretary General of the Guild of African Filmmakers in the Diaspora. So Jihan will be speaking first, then she'll be followed by Professor Ambrose Kom. Do we have Ambrose?
Yes, he's already here.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and Professor Ambrose Kom is professor and mentor extraordinaire who has crisscrossed, in fact, the world with his scholarship, and leaving behind in every single one of these countries a host of scholars he has trained and who now are teaching in some of the most prestigious universities. He has taught in universities throughout the United States, in Cameroon, South Africa, Morocco, in Canada, in France, and Germany. Between 1997 and 2012, he serviced the Eleanor Howard O'Leary Chair in French and Francophone Studies at the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts. He was also the editor of Présence Francophone. The third speaker we're having is Pervaiz Khan, who's a curator, writer, theater maker, new media artist, and filmmaker. And Pervaiz has worked in Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas. He presently is a lecturer at the Wits School of Arts, Film and Television Division in South Africa. He is co-convener of Reframing Africa. Then yours truly will be speaking. I am a professor of French and Francophone literature and cinema at the University of Victoria, which is in Western Canada, just close to Vancouver, BC. And I think our last speaker is going to be Rama Thiaw.
Rama.
Have Rama? So Rama is writer, director, and producer, creator of a film production company called Bulfale Images. Yes, I think Bulfale Images. She is a creator of two, I think, well, I know of two, I think that there is a third one, two documentary films, among which the much acclaimed The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. Rama trained as a filmmaker in various universities and settings in France. So I'm just going to, as a way of introducing the panel and as a way of throwing in a few questions, I'm just going to say a few words, a few very short words. What I would like to do is I would like to piggyback on the panel that was that was offered to us yesterday, the panel in Wolof, where people talked about, in fact, the impact of Sembene on his country. And I would just like to say that three of the ideas that I retained from the contributions of Boubacar Boris Diop and Songe Diouf, gravitate around One, they talked about Sembene's steadfast determination to highlight the cultural identities of the peoples of Africa. And this highlighting, right, I would like to argue, can be seen not only in the thematics of the stories that Sembene wrote, but also on screen, on the characters and on their psychological makeup. But it can also be seen in the aesthetics of his films in particular, which impacted, in fact, a lot of other filmmakers. The second idea that I got from that panel relates to Sembene's steadfast determination to advocate for individual and collective economic autonomy. So just think of the storylines of Khala, Mandabi, but also his early work like Borom Saret. Think of also today, like to relate it to reality, think also today of all those young people trying to reach the coast of Europe at the risk of their own lives. And the third, I think, overarching idea for me that I got from that panel encompasses Sembene's creation and Sembene's constant on and off-screen attention to the individual and collective conditions of social change. Sembene constantly asked and tried to answer the question, what are the necessary conditions for social change in Africa and elsewhere? And I think that the whole idea of Sembene, in fact, rewriting his history or re-imaging history, right, on a popular culture mode, in fact, it buttresses his creation. And so, given all of this, I think when I came out of that panel, one of the things that sort of kept cropping in my mind, like I was trying to find a concept, in fact, to encapsulate what Sembene has done. And the best that I have come up with is the idea of agency. It simply seems to me that throughout his career, this man, whether it was in his images or in his writing, this man has tried, in fact, to point to the history of the continent, right? The history of domination of the continent, the history of domination of these various communities, and speak to members, individually to members of this community, by arguing that the only way in which we can get out of this conundrum of being dominated by people coming from outside and so on, is for us to determine that we are going to be agents of our own lives. And this idea of agencies is manifested in several ways, in fact, in his films and in his writing. So the first question that I would like the panel to address is the various ways in which this agency, in fact, is manifested in his work. So I'm so I'm going to let Jihan speak, and then, yes.
Jihan, after the slide, as soon as you stop.
Okay, Jihan, then the slides, and then Jihan.
That's an amazing way to start. I always forget how amazing the soundtrack and the pace is. I've seen this film at least 10 times, but pure Sembene and beautiful. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you. I'm really honored. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Samba also. I'm not quite sure how to begin. Agency. I guess we saw agency quite incarnated in the action of the princess, as well as in the grace that Sembene always gives his, especially female characters. But I actually want to get to this from a different angle, because I first met Sembene, I think, in 1995, and I come from Egypt. And so I didn't know his work that well. It hadn't sort of crossed our realm. And getting there, meeting him, of course, they were sitting at the Baobab, and you were only allowed to come if you're invited, and it was all very intimidating. And by the time you got to the table, it was a kind of consecration. So it was a very important moment for me on an individual level. And obviously, I got very interested in the idea of Sembene as the father of African cinema. And I always wondered why he's called the father of African cinema. And coming from Egypt, knowing that, cinema started, our first film was in 1910. And with a lot of research, not only a lot, just getting to know a lot of the different narratives, I myself call him the father of African cinema, specifically because of the agency he provided. If you look at, for example, he was the first, let's say, for example, for La Noire d'Eux, the way in which he portrayed women, the way, the grace, it doesn't matter if Joanna was a servant or not a servant, her grace and who she is and what she decided to come to the world with was a first for a lot of African films. Secondly, Mandabe, The Money Order, was the first film in Wolof that goes internationally. And to go even further, one of his films was the first film to be banned by an African leader. So he was the first on many levels, and he dared to be the first in such confrontations. So Professor Niang, when you talk about agency, this daring to be the first on these different levels is a kind of agency to an entire generation to say, yes, we can. Then as a woman and as an African woman, Sembene's main characters in practically all of his films were women. He is I would call him a feminist, really, because, and the power he gave to women on the screen, and the themes he engaged his women on the screen in were in many ways breaking a lot of the narratives of the time. And that's where he connects history with the present. And that's the kind of agency that we as a generation coming after that felt that, he is a central figure in the narrative that he kind of gives us the responsibility to pursue. Thank you. Yeah, that's really what I have to say about the kind of agency. I can talk if we start talking about Sembene, we can say so many things. But I think if we maybe stick to your questions, Dr. Niang, in terms of agency, I think this is really important.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to piggyback on your ideas and ask Ambrose, for example, to address this issue of agency from the point of view, in fact, of the continent today. Like, what is the relevance in terms of agency of Sembene's work today on the continent? Ambroise? There's going to be a clip before Ambrose speaks.
Sergent-chef Diatta. Sergent-chef Diatta, est-ce que je peux vous voir seul à seul? Quels qu'en soient les motifs, même juste, c'est un acte de rébellion. Portez encore l'uniforme militaire. Portez encore l'uniforme militaire. Vous devez leur parler. Vous devez leur parler. Je ne crois pas qu'ils mesurent l'importance de leur acte. Vous êtes instruits, vous savez. Vous êtes instruits, vous savez.
Ils ont fait appel à vous pour nous raisonner. Depuis Morlaix, les officiers nous tiennent le même langage, celui du mensonge. Y a-t-il deux règles dans l'armée? Une pour les noirs et l'autre pour les blancs.
Je n'aime pas quand vous parlez de la chose.
Et comment dois-je parler? Plutôt, je ne dois pas parler. Je dois me taire, c'est ça? Et être complice d'une injustice.
Vous pouvez saisir le gouverneur. Je lui transmettrai personnellement vos doléances. J'irai voir le ministre d'économie si c'est nécessaire à Paris en rentrant.
Capitaine, seriez-vous devenu le bon samaritain ou le Saint-Bernard de ces vichistes? Le droit ne se discute ni ne se négocie. Nous venons d'Europe après avoir combattu vos ennemis. Maintenant nous combattons pour l'Afrique.
Okay, Professor Kom, you can
Okay. Thank you, Sada. Thanks to everybody for inviting me to this panel. Well, I will not really call, maybe it's the same thing, but I will call, instead of agency, I will call it identity, because Sembene himself paved the way and show us the way by making all his films in African languages, even though that create few problems with the government of Senegal. He was showing the way that how we should then become ourselves and recover or build our identity ourselves. In the post-colonial time, in this post-colonial era, the power to be the new African power should be a power that is really made by African for African, and to help African build an environment for themselves. And that's what I will call, I don't know if you call it agency, but I will say the most important thing, according to me, what Sembene taught us was that we should really take side with the African people and create a new environment that will help us to create a society, an economy, an administration. We could see it with Mandabi, that this administration that we see in Mandabi does not at all take into account what Africans come from. Era has given us in terms of heritage, how we should have rethink our communities, our societies, to take into account where we come from by creating an environment congenial to really integrate the African who have not been to school, the African who don't have identity card, the African who don't have birth certificate, African who were not educated in colonial school, who didn't have this colonial environment. How should we do it? How should we integrate that? We cannot, all of a sudden behave like we have just become French, okay? And as a matter of fact, the former colonizer does not really intervene directly to our affairs, to our business. The former colonizer intervened from behind by manipulating us, make us think that our identity is what he gives us, what he makes us believe is our identity, because we are actually behaving, we are actually acting like him. Okay, so that's what I would call, I don't know if that corresponds to what you call agency, but to me, it's the whole issue, what Sembene has been trying to teach us, and I can see that in his books, I can see that in his film, is to show how we have been unable to really create a new or to build, as Frantz Fanon would say, an identity for ourselves, a different from what the colonial master wanted us to become. That's exactly what I have seen in Sembene Ousmane. And you see, most of the time, the colonial master, he does not intervene directly. He just manipulates the new African power, manipulate us so that you govern for him, you govern by really making you people, work for him, but he is not directly, he is not present anymore. But you are the one doing the dirty job for him. So by doing that, you don't have any identity anymore. Your identity is what he is giving you, what he's trying to make you believe that you are free, but actually you are not. And what Sembene has been teaching us, and that's what I can see, is, rethink the whole, your whole position in your own continent, and be what you should have become by helping your own fellow countrymen to build a society that really work for you, not that it's working for somebody else. That's what I can say. For me, it's the whole issue of build, reconstruct your identity, a new identity that will be free of all these prejudices that was imposed upon you by the former colonial master. That's what I will have to say for the time being.
Thank you very much, Professor Kom. I think that what you are suggesting is that, in fact, the kind of identity that Sembene was arguing for was some kind of enabling identity, not the kind of images or the kind of identities that were imposed on Africans, or that were trying to be, that other people were trying to impose on Africans, but something that would be of their own creation, of their own, that they would generate, in fact, themselves. I think that the clip that just preceded your intervention is, in fact, a good illustration of that, because
Sada? Can you hear me?
Sorry, I got muted.
Oh,
yes. So, so then, because in that clip there, like there is the Captain Jata, and then there is this other white officer, and in fact, the white officer was suggesting that he should be the voice for the soldiers, and Captain Jata just refused. In other words, he was suggesting that Captain Jata be silent, and that he would articulate for them what their grievances in fact would be. And Captain Jata resisted, in fact, to that saying. Pervaiz, when we come back, right? I want you to sort of look at Sembene's work from the point of view of the history of South Africa, from the history of your geographical and political vantage point, and try to sort of explain to us or give us an idea of the relevance of Sembene's work and his ideas, the ideas he has articulated through his work. From your own vantage point. But I think we have a clip now.
Qu'est-ce qui ne va pas? Les affaires, mon cher, les affaires. Vous savez, les affaires.
Frère, il y a de l'ambiance.
Bien sûr,
Pas des affaires.
Bien sûr, mais les affaires, mon cher, les affaires.
Et qu'est-ce que c'est ton affaire? Qu'est-ce que c'est ton affaire?
Mon affaire, c'est un dossier que je traite dans le tourisme.
Je cherche quelqu'un pour traiter ce dossier.
Eh oui, je cherche quelqu'un pour traiter ce dossier.
Et si je mets combien tu donnes?
10%.
Et combien je demande toi?
Et combien je demande toi?
15%, je marche.
15%.
D'accord, 15%.
D'accord, 15%.
Parole d'homme d'affaires.
Parole d'homme d'affaires. Parole d'homme d'affaires.
Et comment est-ce que...
Ah,
jamais.
Je ne laisse
jamais de traces dans
surtout
mes affaires.
jamais. Je ne laisse jamais de traces dans mes affaires.
Comptant, compter.
C'est toujours comptant, compter.
Avec...
Tu apportes le dossier demain matin.
Tu m'as compris? Ok.
Avec...
Tu m'as compris?
Ok.
So Pervaiz You're muted.
Okay. I'm now unmuted. Thank you. Thank you, Sada, and thank you, Samba, for inviting me. I live and work in South Africa, in Johannesburg. I was brought up in Britain, and I've been showing Sembene films since 1983. Yes, in a British context, where these days it's called very fancily curating. Yes, in community centres, youth clubs, in all sorts of spaces in Britain, which were non-formal spaces to all sorts of communities, people of colour, as it gets called today, but I'm of a generation that thinks of black as a political colour, not a racial colour, but a political colour, which ties into the questions of Sembene, his contemporary relevance, and also questions of black power. Now, in a South African context, I show this film, but it's more than just about showing this film. I show it to my students. I've been teaching this Gala for the last 7 or 8 years to fourth-year honours students. We look at the book, Gala, which is obviously based on the script that he couldn't get made into a film at first, and he turned into a novel. Now, here we have South Africa gained its freedom in 26 years ago from apartheid. So racial apartheid ended, but what happened in South Africa is economic apartheid continued. Yes, and we have a larger divide between the rich and poor today than there was in the past. We have the most unequal society in the world, according to this European scale of the Gini scale of the ultra-rich and the extreme poor, living in the same society. So when I show Gala, and I show it not just within student context, in community context as well, at the Market Photo Workshop, there's always an audience for it. And the audience is always blown away by what Sembene was saying. And obviously this film is now, 45, 46, 47 years old. Yes, so it's not like it was made yesterday. But in the South African context, it feels so fresh. And it speaks to a South African audience. Yes, and one of the points that I make when I show it, especially to my students, that in terms of Frantz Fanon's work in The Wretched of the Earth, the pitfalls of national consciousness chapter. Yes, what Sembene has done in this film is that he makes it come to life. Yes, so, the questions of political power, what happens. Yes, obviously we have a different situation from the rest of Africa in the sense of settler colonialism, but the context of what happens after that. Yes, from the opening scenes of the film where the French are leaving, yes, supposedly, and then they return very quickly with the cases full of money, and money is handed over. Yes, so it has such a resonance that you can't show it enough in a South African context, and the discussions and debates that it brings about. Yeah, especially because when people start to say Sembene, people say we wish we had filmmakers of this sort. Well, hopefully within a South African context, there's younger filmmakers who are thinking about how to make this and make this sort of work happen. But I think the resonance of his work is without a doubt. And although we've shown Gala, I think also I was thinking about it, the Camp Titerai, the relevance, the connections between. What happened here during the Second World War. I'm jumping maybe to what I wanted to say later, but I think it's interconnected. South African soldiers fought in the Second World War. They weren't allowed to carry weapons. They were allowed to die, yes, on behalf of Europe, but not allowed to carry weapons. When mass graves were dug in North Africa for the soldiers who died from the South Africans, initially the idea was that the black and white soldiers who were South African were going to be put in the same graves. But it was objected. This is under the British, yes, not under apartheid. The Second World War happened when the British were ruling South Africa. So the resonances of Sembene's work continue in so many ways in a society which is torn apart. I'm sure people will understand, but I think, Gala especially speaks a great deal to what happens. And especially what happens is when you get a homegrown bourgeoisie developing. Yes, because it's not about white, colonial capitalism from the outside. It's actually, there's a black elite that has developed, which is, in many ways getting away with murder, literally, in a way that if it had happened under apartheid, there would be protests across the world. Yes, I'm sure that many of you will know about the Marikana massacre, where all these miners were killed. Yes, there have been many. People are killed on a regular basis by the cops during the lockdown. 12 people have been killed by the army and the police, and not one person has been charged. But because we have a black ruling elite, there isn't an international outcry. But Sembene's films are part of our outcry. I mean, when you talk about agency, I think the key thing in Sembene's work, in all of his work, is that he puts forward the idea very clearly that we should be organizers of our future rather than spectators of our fate, that we can play a role in changing history, that we're not just the subjects of it, we're active agents. And I think that's very clear. I mean, the other films, which it's been wonderful to watch the clips. And I was saying to, Samba the other evening when we were checking, or the other afternoon, how tearful I got at watching some of the clips. I mean, it makes me think of my own father who fought in the Second World War and what happened to him. But the other film, which has a lot of resonance here, I think is very important, is Sembene's challenging of traditions, reactionary traditions within Africa. And Mulade is a very fine example of that. He's very good at taking progressive traditions and using them against reactionary traditions, so that they can't be held over people by just saying these are African traditions. Yes, that we should respect our elders. We should respect the men because they're men. Yes, we should be good to our elders, even if our elders are being terrible to us. So he's not afraid. He's not afraid of taking on the clergy, whether it's Christian or whether it's Muslim. He's not afraid of taking on questions of patriarchy. He's not afraid of taking on the elites. And I think that in the South African context is very, very important. Yes, because we have a younger generation that is feeling very lost because it's been betrayed. And I think Sembene plays a role. Whenever people get an opportunity to watch his films, it plays a role in making people feel that they have some sense of being able to change things. I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, thank you, Pervaiz. I think we have another clip before we go to the next speaker, which is me, actually.
baaraam buñ talal ab joxoñ la xam ngeen loolu wante juróomi baaraam yuñ talal kuy rom yelwaan la yaa ñu dajale fii suñu njiit yaa ñu dajale fii ndax xam ngeen lu tax du tous ngir mun a jot ci ndimbal lii dong la te dégg ngeen suñu njiit yi ñuy sant ak di gërëm yërmande gu amul ab ci suñu tur ñun ñëpp ñi fi nekk ak ñi fi nekkul jagleel ko ñi ñu jox ndimbal lii xool leen suñu njiit yi koo ci gis mu ngi bég di layam-layami suñu kanam di daagu mel ni ndimbal lii seen ñaqi bopp la sabab ñun askan wi nga xam ne amuñu kaddu amuñu fayda ñuy fecc ak di woy jagleel ko ndimbal lii ma ne ñoo ñàkk fayda nañ leen ubbi suñ bët yi xool faites le taire te xam ne ak njaboot mun ta sosu faites le taire
bàyyi koog man ci télé mujj wax ci mbooloo
ci len lu dul yelwaan gu sax dak teen gis ngeen ne xewu may gu mel nii dak diiru fanweeri at mu ngi am teen gis ngeen ne xewu may gu mel nii diiru fanweeri at ndimbal lii ñu ñuy séddale ak feneen moo ñuy rey ndimbal lii ñu ñuy séddale ak ngor moo ñuy rey rey na bépp jom ak ngor gu nekkoon ci suñ biir ñoo ñàkk jom kenn amatu fi jom réew yi ñu yónnee may gi ci jéppi ndax xam ngeen ne réew yi ñu yónnee may gi ndax xam ngeen loolu ci jéppi ak tiitar dañuy ree sax fañ dëkk ndax xam ngeen loolu suñu doom yu góor yeeg yu jigéen yi nga xam ne ñu ngi dund ca seen biir foofa ci bitim réew suñu doom yu góor yeeg yu jigéen yi nga xam ne ñu ngi dund ca seen biir foofa ci bitim réew sigi xool kenn ndax gàcce rey na leen mënatuñoo sigi xool kenn ndax gàcce dëgg la suñu réew mënatuñoo sigi xool kenn ndax gàcce dëgg la suñu réew mi coono bu nekk wàcc na fi bajal mu nekk wàcc na ci réew mi du kenn waaye loolu ñun ñoo ci war a taxaw du kenn ñun dong ñoo ci war a mun a taxaw suñu maam Kocc Barma nee na ñun dong ñoo ci war a mun a taxaw su fekkente ne bungaaree as gor suñu maam Kocc Barma nee na dee ko jox suba gu jot li muy dundee su fekkente ne bungaaree as gor nga soppi ko mala dee ko jox suba gu jot li muy dundee bu yàggee nga soppi ko mala wax naa leen ne li fi nekkoon ngay doon ci jom ak ngor ndimbal lii lekk na ko wax naa leen ne li fi nekkoon di korkoral ci jom ak ngor ndimbal lii lekk na ko ndimbal lii lekk ngeen xiif jom ak ngor gu nekkoon ci suñ biir ak mar bu métti bi nekk fii ak ñàkk a colu gi du gis ngeen xiif bi ndax xam ngeen lu ko yokk ak mar bu métti bi nekk fii ak ñàkk a colu gi rappelé wi ndax xam ngeen lu ko yokk seen réew ci boppam ma wax leen li ko yokk bu fekkente ne li muy dunde ak di ko wodoo mu ko yaakaar ci réew ni moom bu fekkente ne li muy dunde ak di ko wodoo mu ko yaakaar ci réew ni moom gis ngeen réew moom laaj leen ma ban kadu li ko dale ci doomam ba ci ay seetaatam benn kadu dong la ñuy xam laaj leen ma ban kadu jërëjëf 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 jërëjëf
Sada, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm going to sort of address this clip, and I'm going to address it in terms of the discourse of Gelawar. And for me, what this discourse reveals is the extent to which, in fact, Sembene knew how to talk to the popular masses. Right, like what sentimental chord, in fact, he had to touch in order to make them react. And one value that is pretty much prized, in fact, in Senegalese society is the idea of honor, of holding your own, in fact, of not being dependent on other people. And what he's showing, in fact, is that the attitude of the leaders of the country are going contrary to these values. In other words, what Ambrose was referring to early on as identity, right? The very values that people have been brought up with, and the very values on which the society has traditionally functioned. These are being, in fact, not being respected by the leaders. The other issue that I want to raise, still with this idea of holding your own, is that, like, this message, like, Sembene is usually perceived as a filmmaker who deals with very heavy stuff, and from a, social realism and so on and so forth. But there's a lot of humor in Sembene's films, right? I mean, Mandabi is hilarious. The very topic of Mandabi, in fact, is absolutely hilarious. Like, I've been in movie theaters in Africa where people are actually laughing, out loud, because of these various situations. In the same way, also, tragic as it may be, Khala also is absolutely hilarious for this. So that this is a man, right, who was creating stories, okay, which in fact address some of the very serious issues in these societies. But instead of sort of doing it in a totally drab and serious ways, was like he would give you these snippets of humor, and he would do it in such a way that the audience would immediately tune in with these things. It's just the craft of an excellent storyteller that he did have. Same way also, if you look at County Chahoy, well, County Chahoy, when you have like these soldiers like in the middle of the night dancing and sort of convulsing their bodies and so on and so forth, that too is very pleasant, in fact, because people recognize some events that they have had in their lives, and people recognize also some typical characters that you find in these various societies. So, and what we have is a filmmaker who definitely has a message and who would like, in fact, who is trying to convey this message, but who is also tapping into the semiotic, right, resources of this society, where people make fun of each other, where people laugh at each other, and so on and so forth. The last point that I want to focus on here is I want to come back on Gelwar, and I want to talk about Sembene and national languages. I mean, the imagery of the discourse of Gelwar is deep. I mean, the kind of metaphors that he's constructing in Wolof, right? It's very ground level. I want to say terre à terre. It's very ground level kind of metaphor that nobody can miss there. Okay, and in this audience, it's a varied audience. You have men, you have women, you have leaders, and so on and so forth. And he is speaking in Wolof, right? And every single one of them, in fact, understands what exactly Gelwar is talking about. Of course, you see also in there the craft of the writer also, who is creating those type of discourse. I'll stop here. I think our next speaker is going to be Rama Thiaw. But before Rama Thiaw, I think there is a clip.
Kole ardo bolokoli temene ibana ka yidum so boloko ne don ye e boloko ni asi sinabu binetu salba kumba ibatu ne don yu be boloko e don yitu ki jo ko wale dem boloti ko muna ye chefo e de ne boloko kankala chefla awo kankala chefla kan de flash udo ne ka amsetu o wololila ala na togoma docteur amsetu o ene kono faraya foya kamsetu la boafe dimsenu nanu yere kalfama wonte kalfa chebi nta chesini kalfa joyu kalfaima ile fanga dem ka ki e ka dem so amsetu nyon le bla koromso ande kenai ay joy ko le fu fola le an polukolo kele pelo kasira kanyegene ke kenta maoma ni yeni juru isago kalfa nyamati to ibaye shuwolu umi jatu awa nafisatu na ubefe au bolokaku aye juru isago aka baw segere jatu na nasa jatu iti boloko na de jatu nasa iwulde ida ni eche so ka fumatu ntajigila wo kole edi ube balika boloko neti boloko ne fati boloko ne konte kole yatanga de so nene na de ani patu kama sila dore masene mayani mo kondani kode koro blanya nga ta temsen nu ni de a kelengele be ay wa fla ni tuba bu safne kuru kelen rediba ardu figi badi amna fla enenke mi yen nyama tigide mna ekolo ardo bi kan nyama ni boira Nyasi, Salba, Binetu, Zenebu, aw denw bɛ kalifa jigi birifiniba de jukɔrɔ yan.
Kuma caman dabila an ka taga denmisɛnw yɔrɔ ɲɛ an ka taa kuma caman dabila.
Rama.
Okay, Rama. One of the issues that I think could establish a link between this clip that we just saw and the revolution will not be televised is the issue of resistance and resistance of women. I think in the television will not be televised is a broader kind of resistance because it's a broader political, whether here in fact is women in fact taking charge of their own bodies. I just wonder if you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Oh, okay. First of all, I'm sorry to be late, and I'm really happy to be here among you. And thank you to Professor Samba and to Jason and to all of you. I'm sorry I'm late. I was on a shooting. In order to answer your question, what I would like just to start with, sorry, it's my English. It's for me the dialectic in Sembene's film between the lonely man or woman and the crowd. And for instance, in Hala, because it's one of my favorite one, what I like in this film, it's the main character is representing the elite, and the crowd is representing the people. And they're like in a Senegalese song, there is kind of someone who is speaking in the lead voice and the crowd who is answering back. There is this dialogue which created a dialectic. In the clip that we have seen, and which is, I think, when Sembene is criticizing our society, the lonely person, she is facing the crowd, but the crowd are the oppressor, and she's the resistant. She's the revolutionary, which is not the case, for instance, in Hala. It's the contrary. The crowd is the revolutionary crowd, and the crowd is the resistance against the main character. And I think it's interesting when Sembene is talking about colonialism, how we use that dialectic, and when he's criticizing our own, I would say, bad tradition, he makes the reverse. I don't know if it's clear what I'm saying. You can interrupt me if it's not really clear. I can't hear you.
It's a good, Rama. Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. And if I would say, with the revolution, which was a little bit different from the aesthetic of Sembene, because I have chosen to follow three main character, male character also, who created that revolution. But from the backstage, the crowd was not in opposition. The crowd was with them. So I think, I'm sorry, I'm making some loops, because most of the time what I've, still I was young, people were saying that Jibril Job Mambeti was more, had much more strong aesthetic than Sembene, and Sembene were more political than Jibril. But I think it's not, it's more subtle than that, because Sembene has a strong aesthetic of, because it's very difficult to make political film, because we have a tendency as filmmaker sometimes to emphasize on the content and not on the form. And Sembene has been all the time, very clear with his form, with this dialectic that he has always created. But in the revolution, for me, my point of view was to show that these three leaders was leading their people, their nation. So the dialectic was much more with the president. So the president was kind of absent. And the only way that had made him exist, it was through archives, French television archives, to emphasize the fact that he was completely disconnected to his people, to his nation. And in that interview, what is really interesting, it has been made by two French males, and he's alone in his big conference room, and he's talking about his population, but the population has never interaction with him because he was, and I think that is also very, I would say, a disease of our time. Our leaders are completely disconnected. They are not in the field. They don't know what our population are living, which is slightly different, I would say, from the period of Sembene, because at least there they were trying to fake it. They were trying to say, oh, we're going to see our population, we're going to have a link with them. Nowadays, they don't even try to fake it. So, I don't know. Yeah. So...
Okay, well, thank you so much. I think also that throughout the work of Sembene, there is a significant amount of silence and absences, right? There are people who never speak. There are people who are present, in fact, who never speak. If you look at, for example, Chedo, well, there are two white priests there. There's one shot in which there are two white priests who are just sitting there and who are saying absolutely nothing. And everybody else is doing this and talking and so on and so forth. And significant, I mean, apart from maybe from Hala, the representatives of the institutions, like the politicians and so on, right, are absent, or the only representation they have in these films is the police officer, right? It's the appearance of the police officer. I'm just wondering whether anybody here would like to elaborate or argue for or against those kind of images.
Actually, I would like to just make a statement. You each could speak for 2 more minutes just to kind of concluding statement. So go ahead.
But for me, the main character in Hala is representing. I don't know who's speaking. Sorry?
Go ahead, Rama. Go ahead. Continue. Go ahead.
I said, for me, the main character in Hala is representing the state, is representing the power, and how corrupt the power was, and how the elite, this elite that has ruled our country with Senegal, has sold our countries, our independence to the French. So for me, it's not absent in a way, but he is really concrete, and we follow him in his fall. And what is silent, I would say, is the crowd, it's the population, which is a little bit silent, but still present with the talk. But the crowd, if you see how we film it, it's always like one block. Even the beggar, they are always one block. And that was I was trying to say in my broken English, this dialectic between the crowd, which is like one body, and the elite who was corrupted, who was the main character. And for me, it's where it's very subtle, because suddenly we are living the journey of this corrupted man. And therefore, we can't judge him in a way like we could if we were just watching news, because we live the journey, but the crowd is silent. The crowd is it's a body who's just answer to him, and it's like in the tassel.
Okay.
So yes.
Jihan.
Unmute. Yeah. I think I just wanted to make a comment based on just all the clips and what has been said. I'm not going to get into the filmmaking as such, because every single one of Sembene's images is multi-layered, every one of them. But I think what is really important at this point is how visionary he was, the themes he addresses. Something like Kom Chiroi. Kom Chiroi is the issues of the tirailleurs is coming on it's becoming a central theme, and to be discussed right now, 50 years down the line. Issues of female circumcision. He addressed them way before his time, like he always, be it, Khala, one of the first narratives to really address head-on the beginnings of corruption within the post-independence nation state. It's a bit like Aikwe Arma's book, The Beautiful Ones Are Not Yet Born. It was just the beginnings, and these are those who dared. And the comment is more about how visionary and daring, which kind of wraps up between what Professor Sada was saying in terms of agency, but agency comes along with a vision. And I think that is the importance of the films, because yes, aesthetically they're interesting, and in taste and whatever can be discussed, but they are a section of heritage collectively on the continent, because the issues he addresses, something like food aid stays with us until today as a problematic. So he really, each and every film went to the heart of the issues way before his time. Voila, that's what I just wanted to say.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Was Professor Kom?
Yeah, to say that what I take from watching Sembene's films or reading Sembene's books is that, all in all, he is an artist for liberation. Whether you are we are in the post-colonial era or in colonial era, he is always advocating that we should stop being treated as mimic men and stop being manipulated, because Africans have been too often being manipulated, either by the traditional leader, by the inside leader, or by the outside leader. And that should really stop. And when you watch film like Mandabi, at some point, it's hilarious, as you were saying, but at some point you feel like everybody is ready to get up and fight against the whole system that has so much oppressed this poor man who received his money order from Europe. He never to catch it, to cash his check. And then in the meantime, you have all the neighborhood coming and trying to really exploit him as much as they can. So actually, what I keep from watching Sembene films is, liberation. Let's liberate ourselves from all this oppressive power, be it from within or from without. And that's what I think we should I will get that, and that's what I will keep, and that's what I will try to convey.
Good.
Okay, Pervaiz. Pervaiz, on t'entend pas.
Mute. Unmute.
Yeah, sorry. Last year I was part of a discussion which was about historians and political activists at Wits University, and I did part of my presentation around Sembene's work. And then there was an elder there who sadly passed away, a writer, and we were chatting afterwards, and he said Sembene was like a god. I said, no, you shouldn't say that to him, because that makes it unattainable for people. We can call him a giant whose shoulders we stand on and see further. Yes, because if he's a giant, that means it's possible. Yes, if you call him a god, then it takes it into another territory. Yes, so which he wouldn't have enjoyed. So he provides a platform for us as human beings to look back at ourselves, and within the African context in a very specific way. He takes all his experience and knowledge of telling stories, as the point was made earlier, to create emotions, to bring you close to characters, and then it's like a call to action. Yes, so he uses emotion, storytelling, humor, music. Yes, but really what he's saying is that we can be active agents in our own future. We can make history. Yes, we're not just those who stand by, and I think his significance will not go away. In the context I see it in South Africa, whenever I'm involved in showing that film and other Sembene films, Mandabi, yes, as well, which we showed here, the audiences get so fired up. The discussions that follow. Yeah, and I think what Sembene across Africa has been doing is very, very important. The only thing that I regret is that Sembene isn't alive to see how his films are being shown across Africa in a way that he would have wished and wanted. Yes, but his passing and these technologies have made something possible. Yes, but I think it's very important that these opportunities are used to activate people, to inspire people, and to give people hope, which is what he was about.
Okay, thank you.
I would suggest before the final clip and my closing statement to have Jason say a word. He has been working very, very hard, of course, to make this happen. So I just want him to say a word to the panelists and to those who have connected throughout the world. Jason?
Hi. Thank you, everybody. I've been working on this project with Samba for 13 or 14 years, and listening to you all talk for the last hour, that in itself made it worthwhile. So I really appreciate all of the panelists, your insights and your passion, and the idea that we're all keeping this important legacy alive is really, really inspiring. So thanks for all that you do on a daily level. Samba, the final clip is our bumper. There's not another clip. So we could say a goodbye, and then we can end with that. And please, everybody who's listening and the panelists, spread the word about the project. It's an act of generosity through a large group of people. Thanks to Chris and Bryce, and Esther is tuning in. Thanks to everyone who's mostly on a volunteer basis who is working to keep this legacy alive.
All right. I don't think there is much to add to that. I just want to share a story with you at the end of this process today. I say the end, but certainly I hope it is not the end, but just the beginning of something that goes beyond Sembene, that goes beyond Jason, myself, and all of you involved here. It is something that is the result, or should be the result, of a collective action. I remember in 2005, when Sembene won the prize at the Cannes Film Festival, of Certain Regard, we decided we are not going to go into the official dinner, but we are going to have a private dinner among us. Sembene was all smile, and I was being contaminated by his smile. All of a sudden, he turned to me and said, "So what is next?" At the same time, he was smiling at what we accomplished. He was also challenging me already to move forward. And today I see Sembene smiling for the reason you all know. I think you all summarize it. Cairo to Cape, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, and beyond. To have Sembene's work displayed like this, I think he is smiling at that, thanks to all our effort. But he also challenging us. Yes, Jihan said it at the beginning. Actually, I like that because it gives me something to piggyback on. Yes, being from Egypt, yes, Sembene being labeled father of African cinema might sound ironic, indeed. The paternity certainly is, I think Sembene is one of the first to give value to the images that come from the continent. But certainly, the challenge also is to us to take it from Jason and Samba's kitchen table to make it a continental endeavor. And I think, yesterday when I was listening to the panel in Wolof, I was having goosebumps. I was just, let me say the word, I was very proud to be part of something like that. But also, this is not Sembene, this is not you, this is not me. It is the preservation of the memory of a continent. What is being done for Sembene, I wish we could wake up tomorrow. I know Sada is also doing a monumental work on Djibril Diop Mambeki. I know Jihan has preserved the memory of Egypt and all of you. So the idea, the dream, the challenge Sembene is throwing at us is to go one more step, 10 more steps. And he likes to give this metaphor, and that will be my conclusion, in a very famous work by M.S. Césaire, La Tragédie du Roi Christophe. Christophe is talking to his wife, and his wife tells him, Christophe, you are demanding too much of the man. The woman said, yes, I'm demanding too much of the man, but not enough of the black people. We are the ones who are in the pit of history. If we need the climb, just imagine the energy that is required of us. Well, Sembene died at age 84 with camera in hand. Well, he threw the baton to us for the relay. Thank you very, very much. And I know the baton will not fall and the transmission will continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Sada, oui.
Thank you. I have what?
Go ahead, Sada.
Oh, I get to speak again.
No, if you want to, I thought you...
No. Well, thank you very much to everybody. Of course, I had other things that I wanted to say. One of which was, well, I think Sembene, as a filmmaker, also living in Africa, right, illustrated very amply the situation of the artist on the continent at that time, because this guy was pretty much a marginal, right, in Senegalese society. Some people would never want to have anything to do with it. When I was going to high school there, I never did study any of his books. Right, I pretty much started studying his books when I started going to university outside of the country. Right, so that but this guy was a marginal who knew. Right, he was at the margin, but he knew the society very, very well. He had a particular feeling, in fact, for that kind of society. And I think that marginality, that predicament, right, has not disappeared. That the artists and the intellectuals that we have on the continent today, right, either by choice